Welcome back everyone. Hi, if you're new, my name is Tori and today I'm going to share with you guys some of the books that I've read recently. So I have 3 books that I read from September. The other 3 that I read last month are already in my fall recommendations video, so if you're interested in hearing more about My Soul to Keep by Tanana Reid, Feed by Amira Grant, or Middle Game by Shannon McGuire, then I'm going to redirect you to that video. So I have the other 3 that I read in September here, and then I also have 2 books that I've read so far in October. So I'm just going to include them now because I don't think I'm going to do like a traditional October wrap up at the end of the month. We'll see. I'm playing around with a couple of different video ideas that I would prefer to do over that. But so of the 5 that I have here, 3 I enjoyed. I didn't love them, but I still think they were solid reads and I recommend them. And then I have 2 that I just didn't like at all. So we're going to get into all of it and I hope you enjoy the video. So the first book that I want to talk about is The Whisper Man by Alex North. This is a thriller novel, but I didn't find it to be all that thrilling. I was just very uninterested most of the time while I was reading this. I'm surprised I didn't DNF it, quite honestly. But in this, we're following our main character, Tom, who just recently lost his wife. So he then takes their son. They move to this new town. But in this new town, years ago, they were plagued by crimes from this man known as the Whisper Man. But the Whisper Man, he's actually been behind bars for years now, but his whole MO was that he would find kids who seemed like they were unloved or neglected and would get close to them by whispering into their rooms at night and just befriending them and eventually like luring them away from their homes and killed them. So the Whisper Man has actually been behind bars for a while, but the book starts off when there is a crime committed that is similar to the crimes that the Whisper Man committed all those years ago. And so that really starts off our story. This young boy goes missing at the start of it, and once that happens, our main character's son, Jake, is in danger of potentially being harmed as well. So we're going through this book in the father's perspective and his first person perspective, and then we're getting some chapters from his son Jake, and then we're also getting the story told from the perspective of the detectives who are trying to figure out what is going on. And it just was all very dry. The story is told very like what you see is what you get sort of story. It was very linear. I feel like a lot of the reveals that came about were just kind of flat. And usually in thrillers, like if there's a reveal, there's like something a little more to that, something a little more sinister going on. But I feel like in The Whisper Man, it was very surface level. Like, here's the reveal, that's it, let's move on. So I picked this up hoping to have something spooky to read for October, but it's kind of a mediocre start to my spooky reading month. The next book that I read was Such a Fun Age by Kiley Reid, and I buddy read this with Shannon from That's So Poe, whose channel I will leave down below for you to go check out, go subscribe. And I didn't enjoy this book either. It's actually one of my least favorite books that I read in 2021. So in this, we have 3 pretty important characters in the story, but our central focus in the story is this young 25-year-old black woman named Amira, who is a recent, somewhat recent college graduate, and she's still very, doesn't know what she wants to do with herself, very aimless. And Amira is a babysitter for the daughter of one of our other main characters in the story, Alix. And Alix is this well-to-do white lady, self-proclaimed feminist, and that's her. And then our other character that we have in here, whose name I already forgot, is Amira's new boyfriend. And so the book starts when Amira is called away from her best friend's birthday party late at night to come get Alix's daughter, her toddler, out of the house because something just happened. So Amira comes to get the child. They go to this grocery store, and at the grocery store, Amira is accused of kidnapping the child, and security is called. It's a whole scene, and everything is caught on camera. And even though that scene is in the synopsis of this story, like the very beginning of the synopsis, that's actually not what the book is about. That moment just kind of becomes like the catalyst for the rest of the story. The story is actually focused on the 3 characters, Amira, Alix, and Amira's boyfriend, and like their relationship, their dynamic, but also their relationship in the wake of a lot of the central themes in the story that begin to come out, like racism and microaggressions and white saviorism and the fetishization of black women and black culture. And we get their story in the midst of those different themes. I feel like all of these characters are just merely like cardboard cutouts of the things that they are meant to represent, but because they are so flat, because these characters, in my opinion, have very little depth to them, the things that they are supposed to represent don't mean anything. I'm reading it, I'm like, okay, I've experienced all of this, but nothing is resonating with me because these characters are not doing anything with the story. It's like these characters are almost background characters in their own book. But aside from all that, the other thing that I really did not enjoy in this story is the dialogue. The dialogue in this, I just felt was so cringy. I mean, it's kind of cringy throughout a lot of the book, but especially like in the scenes with Amira and her like group of friends, some of those scenes just almost like felt like stereotypically offensive. And I was just like, okay, oh my God. And then there was a scene near the end, this isn't a spoiler, but I was already kind of like done with the book at this point, but there's a scene at the end with one of Amira's friends and she does something in an interview and I was just like, that is, if I wasn't done with the book before then, I was done with it after that. So yeah, I did not get on with this book at all. I really feel like this book was not for me, and I mean that very, very literally. So now we're going to get into the books that I did enjoy, just didn't love. So the next book that I want to talk about is Foundation by Isaac Asimov, and I was actually kind of pleasantly surprised by this. Didn't really have any expectations going into it, but I did enjoy, you know, the story as a whole. So in this, we are actually following different groups of characters, but the main premise of the story is that we have this man, Hari Seldon, who discovers this new science known as psychohistory, and it's through psychohistory that Hari is able to predict the destruction of the Galactic Empire. And in order to preserve the knowledge in the Galactic Empire and just, you know, preserve the culture of the Galactic Empire, Hari recommends creating these foundations and people to, you know, kind of catalog everything that has happened in the Galactic Empire and their customs and all that. So in the first book, we're following the people who established themselves on our first foundation called Terminus. And even long after Hari is gone, we are still getting these groups of people many years throughout the history of the foundation, and how they catalog the things that have happened and how they go about trying to sustain this foundation for future generations. And a lot of that just involves a lot of, you know, political maneuvering, a lot of trading. It's a lot of things that kind of go into that. And so we're really getting like the nitty-gritty of that throughout this entire book, which I think can kind of make it feel like a slog in some places, but I actually found that to be pretty intriguing. I really did love the political aspects of this story and like going to these different colonies on different planets and negotiating for the foundation. So I did enjoy that aspect of it. I do think though, even for this book to be as old as it is, it still like holds up really well. I personally found it to be a very accessible story. I am finally glad that I read this, but I'm not sure about continuing on with the series quite yet, but we'll see. And the next book that I read was The Changeling by Victor Lavalle, and this was a book that I buddy read with Angela from Literature Science Alliance. It was a very impromptu buddy read, but I had a great time discussing this book with her, and I actually picked this up for the Blackoweenathon, which is created by Bree from Locked Booktition. And the goal of the Readathon is just for the month of October, you know, you pick up horror, thriller, or at least I think it's thriller, but I know it's horror for sure, like horror, thriller, written by Black authors. So I wanted to get to this month, and I still have Fledgling by Octavia E. Butler on my list for the month as well. So I did enjoy this overall. Like I said, this was a big step up for me with Victor Lavalle because I did read The Ballad of Black Tom by him last year, and I thought that was fine, but this was, you know, this was really solid for me. I guess I would classify this as a horror. This is definitely kind of dark and twisted in the second half of the book, but in this we're following this character Apollo, and the book starts when Apollo is pretty young, and when he's a young boy, his father disappears, and we're following Apollo through the years up to the point where he becomes a husband and a father himself. So that's really the entire first half of the book. We are just really getting to know this man, and he becomes this like rare book trader, so that becomes really fascinating. And yeah, I mean, we're just following him, his family, and we have this overarching theme of parenthood, particularly fatherhood. So as we're getting to know these characters in the first half, something happens where his wife does something just horrific, and that leads Apollo on this just wild journey to try to get his son back, and ultimately his wife too. As we were reading it, Angela and I, we were mentioning this to each other, that this definitely reads like you know, a dark fairy tale. And there's actually even a point in here where Rapunzel is mentioned, and we're getting the story of Rapunzel. And after that whole like scene happens, it's even noted how fairy tales were actually something that were meant to be for adults, but we just kind of watered them down and made them more like accessible for children. But you can definitely tell that Victor Lavalle was playing on that idea of a dark fairy tale and a dark fairy tale for adults. So it was good. There were definitely some very disturbing scenes in here, especially in the second half, as you know, Apollo is venturing kind of deeper into these different parts of New York City to try to get his son back. So I did enjoy this, and I think if you are interested in picking it up, it's definitely worth a read. And then the last book that I want to talk about is just so unsettling and just still not sitting very well with me, and that's Gyo by Junji Ito. And this is actually a manga, and I have been wanting to read Ito for a while now. I wasn't really sure where to start, but decided just to go for Gyo because this is the one that's actually been on my shelf for the longest. This was just a lot. This was just a lot. I was so not prepared going into this manga like at all. So in this, we're following this couple, Tadashi and Kiley. I'm probably not saying her name right, but we're following the two of them. And then one day this fish comes out of the water on these legs, and everything just smells really awful. And the story just kind of takes off from there. Pretty soon, all of these sea creatures, all of these fish are coming out of the water, just overflowing into the land. They smell awful, and it just becomes so disturbing and so unsettling the more that you read this. And there's also just this like heightened sense of urgency to the story because the girl in here, Kiley, she like constantly smells them, and it's almost like unbearable for her in so many scenes. And so she's always screaming about like she can smell it and it's right there, and that alone just made me so uneasy while reading it because I'm just like, oh, make it stop, like make the smell go away. Like I was starting to smell something. So we really go from there, and we're really getting the story of how these fish are just like invading the land, and it becomes wild after a certain point, and honestly just a little bit disgusting. So definitely if you go pick this up, be prepared for that. Things get out of hand extremely quickly, but I am glad that I finally picked this up. So if you have another recommendation for another Junji Ito, definitely let me know. So that's it for me, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you guys had a great September, and I hope your October is off to a spooky start. You've been reading some good books lately. Let me know down in the comments what you've been reading recently, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.